End of the French half of the third turn. They've already done their bombardment of the artillery and moved all their units. There was no Prussian charges or assaults this phase. As you can see, this horse battery has gotten around the back side of the square and picked off an infantry miniature, and this battery over here is firing canister at point-blank range into the Prussian square, struggling to get away from the French column, which is now trying to come up and assault it. Otherwise, the French half of the turn is pretty much done. The 10th Dragoons have moved up again. The 9th is at the edge of the woods. The 8th Infantry Division is advancing, still in march, while the is pushing forward and is now lining up two column assaults on the abbey here. The 4th Light Cavalry is trying to squeak through, maybe cut off that retiring Prussian battery. And out here in the woods, the sole Prussian skirmishing Fusilier Battalion is holding up the advance of the French Cavalry Division, trying to pick its way through the underbrush, and a column of French infantry, which is really what is pushing back the Prussian screen. End of the third turn, and also end of the Prussian half of the third turn. As you can see, the Dragoons charged up the slope for 4 inches and then halted their charge. The horse battery fired in the artillery fire phase and caused a loss in that square, but it held its morale still. Over here, the infantry square is just getting pounded by the horse battery, lost another figure, which means it's now down to half strength, and with the half strength adjustment it fell into disorder, that leading square. It didn't actually rout. The Sarge charged across the frontage of the battery, trying to slow up the battery from going up the hill, so instead the Prussian artillery unlimbered right on the road and blasted them as they rode by, promptly dropped a figure. On the assault on the building, both columns assaulted. One of them failed to get in and lost a figure going in from musketry fire, and so it had to retire back, a normal move. But the other column was successful in its assault after losing a figure and ejected the Prussian 28th Infantry Battalion from being the defending position. So at the end of the third turn here, in the first hour of our scenario, we can see the French are slowly advancing across the open ground and approaching the woods, while on the Prussian left flank they've successfully gotten the light cavalry in position to block the advance of the Dragoons through the woods quickly. So this is going to significantly slow them up. Otherwise, the Prussians their lead squares are just getting pounded into submission as the French infantry is trying to close as the squares are backing up. They've taken the Abbey building, and out here on the French left or the Prussian right, the Fusilier Battalion is still slowly withdrawing its 4-inch move every turn to open the distance and get out of the firing range of the infantry, which is what's required when you pull back a screen. And at the same time slowing the advance of the French infantry column and the French Light Cavalry Division, the 5th. End of the French half of the 4th turn. We've calculated the MFP for the hour, and it's been added to the totals. During the firing phases, the French horse battery here dropped another figure out of the 28th Infantry or Berg foot square here, but even being disordered, they're still holding the ground. As you can see, we rolled a nice 1. They're under columnar assault by the infantry. In the middle here, that square finally broke, just couldn't take it from the horse battery, another canister round, and so they routed and fled to the rear here. The 3 figures which were remaining out of an 8-figure battalion. Over in the woods, it's just been the normal sporadic. French moved up, little pistol firing, and as you can see, the French are still moving forward. Out here on the French right, the cavalry is now trying to push its way through the woods, met by Prussian skirmishing cavalry and a Landwehr regiment in line. So it's going to be an interesting fight here, cavalry versus cavalry in the woods. Definitely disordered all around. And of course, as you can see, the 10th Dragoon Division is slowly coming up and about ready to deploy, as the 8th Infantry Division is advancing here, and the 11th is on the other side. Prussian half of the 4th turn is now completed. Interesting fights in the woods here. The Prussian Ulan regiment closed its ranks, promptly rolled a 1 to receive, so it was up 1 in morale, and when the Dragoons impacted it, they successfully beat their way past and forced the retirement of the Prussian Ulans. In the other fight, the Landwehr cavalry failed its morale to receive, so it went into disorder. Dragoons handsomely chopped it apart, and then scattered the Prussian Light Infantry Battalion in open order behind when they failed their morale roll as the routers fled by. So both those units are now fleeing to the rear. Actually, the cavalry's fleeing the rear, and the Prussian Light Fusilier Battalion is in morale disorder retirement. So the French won both fights here on the French right. Out here in the middle, after the artillery fire and musketry is completed, the Berg square finally broke, losing a figure from the artillery fire, and it is routed. But before they ran, their musketry caused the loss of a French infantry. Actually, it was a musketry shot that killed the man, and consequently, in the exchange of fire, they dropped a Frenchman. Over here on the center, the SARs were bombarded by the Prussian battery on their flank and lost a figure and promptly went into disorder. End of the first half, the fifth turn. Prussians rallied up here in the back. The routing Landwehr cavalry rallied up. The Lancers rallied into good order, same with the Fusilier battalion. During the French movement, they're pushing forward the 10th Division around the flank and engaging close combat now in the woods, at least seeking to get close combat in the shock phase upcoming. Meanwhile, the 8th Infantry Division has reached the edge of the woods. They are fighting alongside, but again, the Prussian square that was beside the battery finally got shattered by 2 canister shots from the 2-horse batteries, lost 2 figures, and promptly routed into the woods. The SARs, as you can see, lost another figure, so the remaining 1 figure is routed away. The Prussian artillery has certainly caused discomfort in the 4th Cavalry Division, which is now officially at 20% loss. Meanwhile, in the woods, finally one of the Fusilier marksmen dropped another Frenchman, as the French are still pushing along on the left flank. Second half, or the Prussian half of the turn 5, has been completed. The French Dragoons successfully won their melee against the Prussian Dragoons and forced them to retire disordered. Meanwhile, the Prussian Lancers, or 6th Light Lancers, have reoccupied the woods in skirmishing order, trying to slow up the 10th French Dragoon Division. In the middle, the Prussian infantry is still routing. They haven't had a chance to rally up yet, which will be at the beginning of the next French turn. As you can see, the Prussian Landwehr is turned around and trying to reestablish a line, and this Prussian Fusilier battalion is skirmished out in front of the advancing close-order Dragoons in the woods. French infantry is about ready to move forward, and on the far flank, the Prussian infantry, as before, is backed up away more than 4 inches, lost a few pieces, some firepower, but didn't cause any losses. Pretty quiet from a casualty point of view. The only person who lost a figure was the Prussian Landwehr here holding the front in a musketry exchange with the French line infantry. First half of turn 6, French half of the turn is completed. As you can see, the French Dragoons of the 10th Division are now approaching shock combat here against the skirmisher screen. Same thing with the Fusilier screen. The Dragoons are trying to push them back in. The French columns are still advancing up through the woods. Guard Dragoons are just trailing up the rear here. Columns are coming up the road, but they're being held back by the Prussian battery, which fired but didn't cause any losses. The 2 horse guns tried to engage the Prussian battery but didn't cause any counter battery effect. When it comes to rallying, one of the Prussian routers rallied up, but 2 others are still routing away, and it's most likely they're going to rout off the board. And on the far left flank of the French, or the Prussian right, the French cavalry has exited the woods and they're getting in position to call a charge and probably will chase away the screen and open up the left flank a little bit. In the columnar assault and the exchange of volleys, the Prussian Landwehr fell into disorder from the French line firing into it, but before they fell into complete disorder, they caused a loss in the French advancing column. End of turn 6. Prussian half of the turn is now completed. Down here in the low foreground, the skirmisher screens pulled away from the advancing Dragoons. Didn't suffer any losses in doing it. Same thing here, the skirmishing Fusiliers pulled away from the advancing Dragoon columns or lines and didn't suffer any losses from the withdrawal fire. The Prussians are trying to do a little hedgehog type defense alongside the wall as as the battery limbered up and is trying to pull down the road. Out in the Landwehr sector, the Landwehr failed to receive and promptly routed away, along with the Fusilier battalion out in the left flank from the charging French cavalry. So they both are routing. Hopefully they'll rally up. Other than that, hardly any firepower losses this turn. It's a pretty quiet turn, but this is the end of the turn 6, which means on turn 7 is an hour turn, so most likely the Prussians are going over their MFP allocation, which means they're going to be down 1 for every turn hereafter. Which is pretty good considering the sufferings they have. But prior to that, the Prussian cavalry is going to try and redeem itself. Before the French cavalry can get out of the woods and call a charge, they are going to charge themselves and cause mischief, hopefully, in the French Dragoon lines.